Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a 22-year-old competitive bowler from Canada, currently living near Toronto. Welcome back to the COMPCLIMB training series, where I record most of my training, provide in-depth analysis of every session, and just chat about climbing with an emphasis on competition. So, for anybody who has been around since day one of the COMPCLIMB series will recognize this gym. So this gym is actually where this is where I filmed my first episode of COMPCLIMB back in like May, I think, is when I started it. And we are at a gym called Boulderhouse in Langford on Victoria Island. And the reason we're here is, I mean, not only were the national championships in Vancouver like a few days ago, and Victoria is just like an hour and a half ferry ride away. But as you'll know, Libor Haroza, who you saw at the beginning of the video and you can see hanging out with us, is Maddie's personal coach. And so what he does is he's like her remote coach. So he writes all of her training programs and he just, can send them to her via text and like kind of has her like yearly training program and gives it to her every month. But what's also important for a coach is obviously to work with the athlete one-on-one. But because he lives all the way out west and Maddie and I live on the east, he can't see her all the time. But because Maddie is training at such a high level and she's such a high level competitor, she can't just sort of half-assed the relationship she has with her coach. So it's nice that it's actually convenient that we're already out west to go like do it like a little check-in with Libor. But even when we're not doing a check, or even when it's not convenient, Maddie will deliberately like go fly out to Victoria at least like 3 times a year just to check in with Libor, have like a little mini training camp, and so he can like see where she's at and obviously better adapt her training program. So yeah, this is sort of our one of our checkups throughout the year in Victoria. So Libor can work with Maddie. And if you remember, like our last time here was in May, and so that was sort of what was happening back then, and that was just around the time that I had really decided to give the COMPCLIMB series a shot. So I'll also just quickly mention, like Libor is Maddie's personal coach, and he works with other athletes as well, like high level athletes. And he was telling us during this trip that he wants to start a website and he wants to sort of expand his coaching sort of repertoire and coach some other high level athletes, and I think some up and coming athletes as well. Like he might start something with like different tiers, but he's still in the works of that. I'll link his Instagram down below. He's a really great coach, and if you're like interested in like, I've gotten some requests or like some questions about whether I'm coaching right now or not. And I'm already like quite busy with training and competing and even just like making these videos. I've gone back and forth about whether or not I have time to coach. And I think right now I just don't. But like Libor is like an even better option than me. And I don't know if what stage he's at with this, or if he's gonna like really commit to expanding his athlete repertoire. But I'll link his Instagram, and you can like tune in to his Instagram every now and then, see if he gets his website up and running. And he's like a great coach, and he does remote coaching, and he can send you a training program. And so obviously Maddie works with him, and I'm quite stubborn myself. I've been told a lot of times that I'm uncoachable, but I did work with him for a little bit, and he is really good at writing a program. I found that I was just too stubborn, and I wanted to do sort of my own climbing training the way I wanted to. But something that's actually always stuck with me from Libor is a lot of the workouts I do. I found even when I wanted to start doing my own climbing training, I still asked him to write my workouts. And then it just got to the point where I sort of learned everything that I wanted to learn from Libor, and then I started writing my own workouts as well. But basically all of my workouts that I write are heavily influenced by Libor. And he taught me a lot about how to properly strength train for climbing, and it was like super helpful. And it's actually interesting. So like the past few months, we haven't been doing obviously too much off the wall training. Like we haven't been doing any sort of like fancy exercises in the weight room or whatnot. And that was simply just because, also I'll quickly pause and say that this boulder was like super epic. This was my favorite one from the whole day of training here at Boulderhouse. A really hard boulder. Yeah, I really like this one. But yeah, we haven't been in like the weight room for a while just because we've been in Germany, and the gyms in Germany didn't really have sort of the classic like weight setup and like weight racks and squat racks that most of the gyms in Canada do. So it's actually gonna be something quite exciting going forward. Is like when we write when I write my next program, I'm gonna be doing like some way fancier workouts, and I'll definitely feature a lot of the exercises that I learned over the months and stuff that Libor's taught me that really helped me level up my strength gains. But yeah, I learned a lot from Libor, especially about sort of strength training and properly periodizing program. And I can't wait to feature more of sort of what I've learned in the next training program that we write. And that being said, right now, like I said, I had 3 days of rest, and now I'm climbing here today. and I hadn't written my program after. I hadn't written anything on my program after nationals. I usually only write so far ahead, and then I sort of reevaluate when I get to the end of a program. So I wrote the program for nationals back in May, and now here we are after nationals, and I'm programless. So what I'll do is I think I'm just gonna sort of mess around for the next few days. I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to take a rest week after nationals, and the reason I decided against it is simply because we're out west, where obviously Maddie and I are not a lot of the time, and it's just good to take advantage of the gyms with like sort of a fresh amount of like new boulders. I exhausted a lot of boulders around the Toronto area like right before we left for nationals, and if I were to take my rest week now and then go back to Toronto and then climb, I would have just less new boulders. And so this is something I'll do is like I'll try to plan my rest weeks that I have based on like what location we're in, and if I have the opportunity to sort of take advantage of like a lot of new boulders in an area, then I'll like move my rest week a little bit later, which is exactly what we're doing here. So I decided, yeah, I'll just have some fun sessions, like sort of climb, mess around. It's also fun to sort of, I've mentioned this in previous videos where I talk about momentum and how it's a real thing. And if you do sort of well at a competition or an event, you sort of have these comp style juices flowing in your body, and your brain knows how to climb comp style really well. And so I wanted to sort of take advantage of that. And I was definitely feeling it. Even today, I was just finding that I was moving really well on the wall, and it was cool to like feel in form. And so I wanted to milk it a bit, get on some new boulders, and it was a good decision overall. So check out this last move. Before I forget, I go two hands to this finish hold. So that's going to be today's tip of the day. You'll notice I dropped the finish of that boulder once. I tried to go up just one hand. And this tip of the day is pretty simple, but it's pretty potent. And I think it is like a pretty this just works all the time, pretty much, for me at least. For the sort of like on slab, especially when you have the sort of stand up to a thundercling, we like to call it, like a thumb undercling. Any sort of like superhero stand up to a thundercling move is usually best executed with two hands, actually. I remember, I think it was like a Salt Lake World Cup. It might have been last year's. It was a semifinal. Maybe last year's, 2 years ago. I don't know. It was the men's semifinal boulder. I remember it was the last boulder in semifinals, and it had like this sort of same move. The last move was this superhero stand up to a thundercling, and it was funny to see all the athletes that found success with that move went two hands. And I don't, maybe like one or two people did it with one hand, but it was very evident that most athletes were finding success with two rather than one. And it just gives you, because you can even sort of oppose with your thumbs and create like almost like two Gastons. And it just gives you way more control and stabilization to do that sort of move with two hands rather than one, even though it's kind of deceptive because that finish hold looks like it's so small. It only looks like it should really be attacked with one hand. But if you even just go with two, it gives you a lot more control. And I think that boulder was a good re-emphasis, that's not a word, reminder of that tip of the day. So yeah, I decided to climb for like the week after nationals, and just take advantage of the new boulders, the new gyms, and sort of ride this momentum that I had after a good event. And then what I'll do is I'll probably take, because I took 3 days off, which is like almost a rest week for me. Usually my rest weeks are like 5 days. I'll probably take like a shorter rest week after we finish this week here in Victoria, and then we go home into Ontario. I'll probably take like 3 or 4 days off. And then what I'll do is I'll start a program. So before our next little mini rest week, I will get back to the notepad and write down our next program, which is going to be super exciting. It'll be fun to train, like properly train at home. Like, yeah, we were sort of training like the week leading up to nationals, but we were just having like super short sessions, just focused on some bouldering. But it'll be nice to like showcase like the training facilities around, and like I said, like do some like pretty epic workouts in these nice setups that we have in our home gyms in Canada. But yeah, you'll notice this whole time we've sort of been going around doing a bunch of epic looking boulders. Like Boulderhouse has 2 locations. This is the Langford location, and then there's also the Victoria location. Both gyms are just amazing. Like they're filled with really good boulders. And anytime I'm on the West Coast, like Boulderhouse is the gym that I always look forward to going to. They have some really great setters. Hamish is a head setter here, and he's psyched. And there's just like a lot of quality hard boulders. That's what especially when I noticed. That was like the first. Oh, that's Libor, by the way. If you haven't noticed him before. But like right when I walked in the gym, I just noticed a whole bunch of hard-looking boulders up, and they were all like really good quality. And I was super psyched. I was glad that I didn't decide to take rest week. I'm sure if I like walked in the gym just to hang out with Maddie, if I decided to have a rest day, I would have regretted it immediately because the gym was filled with like some really good hard-looking boulders. And so speaking of hard boulders, this boulder that we're getting on here was the only boulder I didn't end up setting from today, and it is quite the test beast. Some of these moves I couldn't tell if they were even possible when I was first trying this boulder, and I ended up working it for a while. So what this episode is going to feature 2 days of climbing at Boulderhouse, Langford. So today was the first day I climbed after nationals, after having my 3-day rest week, and then after I try this boulder a couple more times, we're going to go into the next day, which is where I come back to this gym and just sort of have like another mini session. Both of these sessions were only like an hour and a half, just sort of like, you know, casual messing around, climbing, not too much of an agenda. But yeah, I saved this boulder for the end because it looked like it was sort of like almost a bit relaxing, because we're not actually grabbing any holds really hard on this boulder. This boulder is just all about sticking, which is something I need to practice and something I need to work on. So I planned to sort of just suss out this boulder at the end of today's session, and then really work it properly tomorrow in the next day of training, because I could tell that this boulder was going to be really hard and it was going to need a lot of work. One more try to the ending, and then So here we are back the next day for another just sort of chill session of bouldering at Boulderhouse. Again, not really much of an agenda, just climb around, have some fun. Definitely want to get back on that blue boulder. That boulder is a good one for me to work on just because it's a weakness of mine with the friction-based climbing, but it's also just a lot of fun. And even though I'm bad at that style of climbing, I actually really like to climb on it because it just feels like you're floating when you do the moves really well. But yeah, so what we can expect for the next couple of days is basically this is day 2 on, and then I'll have a rest day tomorrow, and then I'll probably do 2 more days of training, just sort of the same sort of thing, like an hour and a half session, something like that, just sort of mess around. And then after that, Maddie and I will fly back to Toronto, where I'll probably take 3-4 days off again, and then that's when I'll start again, like on a nice proper training program. And I still got to write that. I know that I'll definitely go into a bit of like a more high volume phase again, and we'll do like a lot of strength training. We'll bring back some campus sessions, definitely do some like heavy duty workouts, and like a lot of finger strength, and just sort of like strength building, because what the next sort of goal on the horizon, since nationals is no longer the end target that we've been like having like staring down as we've been training, so the next new thing is going to just be the North American Cup circuit. Well, that being said, I don't know if we're going to be having like a Canadian team selection comp this year. If that does happen, it should be at the end of February, and that's just sort of another event for the Canadians to get points to be selected for World Cups. But if that doesn't happen, then the next sort of high priority competitions for me are going to be the North American Cups, which usually start around April. And there's 3 of those. Usually what they've been doing for the past couple of years is they have 2 in the US and then 1 in Canada. So these are like the best opportunities for me to get points to move up in the Canadian rankings to be selected for World Cups again. So those are definitely the highest priority. And that means we have like quite a few months actually to work with for training wise, leading up to these events. You know, what is it? End of November, about to be December. So we got, like 4 or 5 months to train and peak. Like this is where, so we did like a pretty sizable peak for nationals. I put a lot of emphasis on it, but now we want to be feeling like the best we've been feeling all season by like April for some North American Cups. And that's going to be, we're going to be putting a lot of training into that. So we'll start a new sort of high volume training phase once we get back to Toronto. But yeah, for now, here we are back on this boulder that I was talking about. Now this boulder is just crazy. There is not a single easy move on this boulder. This was like basically the whole session's worth of today. I knew going to the gym, I was like, okay, this session is just going to be all about this boulder. And usually when I'm trying a project, I can have a pretty good idea of like sort of how long it's going to take me to do this. So when I was testing out this boulder yesterday, I was like, yeah, okay, this is like a boulder that's going to take me a session to do. I know it's going to take me like 2 hours to get the scent of this boulder. There were so many little nuances I had to learn, like so much micro beta, like how do I grab these holds properly? And like also what's kind of like the sort of catch-22 with this kind of boulder is you sort of need to take the time to figure out all these nuances, but then by the time you figure them all out, your skin is actually like heated up too much, and it's just almost a bit too greasy, and the holds aren't as fresh in your hands anymore, that you actually probably can't send the boulder by the time you figure out all the little nuances. That's what I found was the case with the yellow boulder from a few sessions ago that we were trying at my home gym, Climbers Rock, with like even these same holds, right? We were climbing on the flat holds, and when I just worked that boulder too much, it just got to the point where there was no more stick in my hands. My hands were too sweaty. I was getting too nervous, and like I knew I had no chance on the boulder, even though I'd figured out all the micro beta. So I had to actually come back to that boulder another day. But like this was sort of the only day that I knew that I was gonna have to try this boulder, because there's also another location of Boulderhouse, Victoria, that I want to go have some sessions at, and we only have 2 days to work with. So I figured that this was probably just going to be the only session I had on this boulder. So it was like kind of like a fight that I knew was going to be not in my favor, because it was going to take me a while to figure out all this microbeta, but then I wouldn't be sticky enough to do it. And so some of the microbeta included, for this move here, I was learning that these holds are like so precarious, like this left hand and then the right hand are just so bad. You actually can't find myself able to really pull off of them. So I had to bring in this right foot to actually just help me push for this next move. And this move actually ended up being super cool. It's like every time I thought I was really close to sticking the sloper, but it seems like it's a really good hold. But if you're a little bit too far up from the hold, too far up from the wall, you actually can't really hold it well. So this move was super cool. I almost felt like I was trying two versions of this boulder. Like I was attacking it from a bunch of angles just to really try and close the gap between sending it and not sending it. So I was almost treating this boulder as like a stand start and a sit start. The stand start is from like the bean, and then the sit start is from these two slopers here. And like this first move, I mean, it's definitely possible. You'll notice in a few tries, it actually might be on this try, I realized that I can hold these two holds together. Like, yeah, like here, I'm about to figure out that I can actually, it's very doable to hold these two holds together. The hard part I was realizing is obviously just jumping out of the start holds. Like it is just, they're so bad. And I find that the foot is like almost a bit too high. I would wish that the foothold was a bit lower, but obviously that's like the bottom of the wall and it can't go any lower, because I found like I just couldn't pull myself in with these slopers. I would want to be a bit more under them. And it just made for a really hard first move. And I didn't feel very close to really sticking it at all. So I sort of was just like, okay, maybe I can just get a cent of the sand start, and that can be enough. That can satisfy me for the day. So yeah, I try like a couple more times. Like maybe I can connect it from like the in between the sit start and the sand start, like trying to just jump from the start hold into this position and get the sand of the boulder. But my skin was getting a little sweaty, and I found that I could not stick this bump move to the sloper off the crimp from jumping into the first move. Like I felt so far away from sticking the bump move, but as soon as I climb into the bean here, without doing the first jump, I can stick this move easily. And that's just how crazy these like friction boulders are. It's just, if you add one more move and you have like that, 2% more sweat on your hands, it's just crazy how it can change an attempt. And so, yeah, I just sort of gave up on that boulder. I was happy with my send of the sand start. I knew that it was going to be a bit beyond me to get the full send. That was a really good boulder and good one for me to work on. I was definitely learning, like, I even said this to Maddie and Libor as I was trying the boulder. I said, I'm really realizing something about this kind of boulder, and it's your attitude can actually have such an important factor in it. If you sort of are chilled out and like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of sussing at the moves, I don't really have an agenda. I don't actually care if I'm getting the send of this boulder. You're going to be calmer, and you're going to be sort of less anxious and nervous trying to get a send of a really hard boulder, and thus your hands will produce less sweat. You'll just sort of be a bit more chilled out. And I find that I'm stickier and more relaxed, and my body can just be a bit looser and sort of engage a bit more optimally on these slopers. Whereas once I started putting the moves together and getting like really nervous and worked up, like wanting to get the center of the boulder because it was like really cool and I just wanted to do it, then I just started getting more nervous. I got sweatier, and then it was just like so far off. So that was actually something I was taking away from that boulder while I was trying it, and something that I can learn something that I learned and how I can tackle this sort of weakness of mine better going in the future. And that's simply like, you almost want to trick yourself. You almost want to play mind games with yourself. And there's like a lot of times when this comes into play when you're a competitive climber as well, as being able to play mind games with yourself and tricking yourself into thinking things or acting in a way that's going to help you perform better. It's like, you can say obviously we all go into a competition wanting to do our best and maybe wanting to achieve a certain result, like, oh, I really want to go into this event and win it. But then that's obviously is sort of a catch-22, because if you go into an event with that attitude, you're going to get super nervous and it's going to make you perform worse. So how do you trick yourself into not caring as much so that you climb a bit more loosely and a bit more relaxed, and you're actually able to perform like you do in training, which is going to get you a better result. And so that's sort of like, this is another example of that. And that's like the analogy, but even just behind trying this friction-based boulder with like these really precarious slopers, if I was getting too worked up and trying to send the boulder, it actually hurts me in the end. Whereas the attempts where I cared less and I was just sort of sussing at the moves, I felt stickier. So that's sort of just something I was taking away from that boulder, is really re-emphasizing the fact that mind games are powerful. And if I want to find success on these sticky-based boulders, I need to almost trick myself into not caring a lot so that my hands don't sweat as much and I can just be stickier. So anyway, that wrapped up a couple days of training at the Langford location of Boulderhouse. I think the head setter, Hamish, actually messaged me a little while ago, and he said that he set some more boulders specifically for me and Maddie at this location. So we'll probably come back to Langford one day to get on these boulders that he set. And then we'll also check out the other location in Victoria, which is like just as good. So look forward to a couple more sessions at Boulderhouse coming forward. Insert catchy video right here.